Welcome to Founders Future, a podcast powered by Closers.io, where we dive into the journeys of innovative entrepreneurs and explore the road ahead for them and their companies. I'm your host, Mishal Saeed, and in each episode, we uncover the stories behind impactful ventures, the challenges faced along the way, and the strategies driving their future growth. Today, we're thrilled to have Jeremiah Patterson joining us. He's the founder and CEO of Lunabre Inc., and he is a self-taught web developer who launched his first venture at age 14 and now leads a technology-driven consultancy that empowers businesses through innovative web development and software solutions. We'll explore his founding story, how Lunabre is transforming businesses, and what his vision looks like for scaling this dynamic firm. So let's dive in. Jeremiah, welcome to Founders Future.
Thank you.
Absolute pleasure having you on. So take us back to the beginning. What inspired you to start the company?
Yeah, we started Lunabre. So a lot of people call it a lot of different things, Lunabre, and it's a play on a few different words. But what really got us to launch the venture was I spent 20 years in the Air Force. And alongside those 20 years, I also built and sold 7 businesses. So this is now my 8th one. The first half of my career in the Air Force was primarily in mental health clinics. So helping patients, doing substance abuse counseling. And then the latter half of my career was primarily within the intelligence agencies. While in the intel agencies, I was also helping out with a lot of the Air Force's innovation framework that they were coming up with. And so, in helping with a lot of that, using the business acumen that I had of build, measure, learn, like Eric Ries, taking a lot of those things, incorporating them into different workshops, and helping to helping the intelligence leaders and operators understand and learn how to operate at a higher, better, faster performance rate. I took that and started to think about ways that we could incorporate that into the civilian community. And it just so happened that one of my colleagues, he used to actually be my boss in the Air Force. His name is Dr. Chris Noah. He's a psychologist, and he was here at my final duty station at Langley Air Force Base. And we put our heads together and we said, hey, look, we're really good at helping the intelligence community execute on objectives and targets a lot better than they were in the past. Maybe there's something there in terms of how we can help corporate America do something similar, obviously, when it comes to business objectives, to help their people really impact the outcomes in terms of monetary gain.
That's incredible. So as far as like really how you generate revenue today, what does that look like with the core offer? I know there's web development, there's some software solutions, some consulting involved. How do you structure primarily what you do for some of the clients you work with?
Yeah, so we don't do the web development piece and we don't do the software solutions. We do primarily human performance optimization. And we've shifted a bit in terms of focusing on the technical aspects of it and have gone into the human aspects of it, especially with the advent of AI and just the huge push with all of the technical acumen. We found that a lot of times the people get left behind. And so our core offers, when we first came into this, we weren't quite sure what the value proposition would be. We knew that we had something special because we'd done it hundreds, if not thousands of times in the intelligence community and in the military. But again, we weren't sure what that value proposition would look like in corporate America. It just so happened that one of our first clients was an AI company who wishes to remain confidential, but they brought us in and said, hey, we just want you to essentially assess the performance of our organization and see if there's anything that you can uncover that maybe the executive staff or the executive team doesn't know about. So we spent about a month doing interviews, and this is what we do, right? We really embed ourselves into the culture of the company. So we'll interview everybody from the janitor up to the CEO and everybody in between. And this company had just gone through a recent acquisition. And when I was interviewing some of the folks that were acquired, I noticed that there was some underlying tension and I couldn't really understand or grasp exactly what it was. So I asked them very pointed questions. And one of the software engineers said, yeah, 20 of us are going to quit in 4 days if this doesn't change. And I said, okay, stop the presses. Is this something that you want me to help solve? Or are you all just committed to, hey, we're gonna leave? And he said, no, we've been screaming for help. It's just we feel like nobody's listening. And so I immediately went to the executive staff and said, hey, you're about to have a critical failure in your company if you don't address this right away. And so they were able to do an emergency meeting, talk to the engineers, understand exactly what was going on because, and I'll get to a little more of the nitty gritty later, but there was just a huge difference in culture from the primary company to the company that was acquired. A huge difference in culture, not just in the way that they operate, but also where they live and what their country's work styles are. And so, because this was a foreign entity that they'd acquired. And so, just having that common communication amongst people resulted in the prevention of $14.7 million in immediate losses that they were about to encounter. Not to mention that this was like the core team at the center of this company. If they all were going to leave at the same time, this company would have crumbled. And so here we are 2 years later, and that company's now worth over $7 billion.
That's incredible. As far as what a typical client engagement looks like with a lot of the ongoing work that you're doing on that front, how is all of that packaged and productized?
Yeah, so that's interesting that you bring that up because historically my businesses had always been product based, right? Like I know how to sell a widget and I know how to get people who want to buy that widget and I know how to get people to the website to buy that widget. But when you're selling a service based business, I found that it's a totally different beast. And with it, we in the military, we call it the squishy things, right? Like the people and the culture and how you talk to people. But we needed a way to communicate that to corporate leaders. And the typical notion that corporate leaders have is okay, I want to know in an instant what it is that you offer, how it's going to benefit me, what the ROI is, what the cost of inaction is going to be. And so we've really come up with four primary offers. One is called Tracer, which is what I just mentioned with the AI company that we did. Of course, being in the military, we love acronyms, and Tracer stands for Targeted Rapid Assessment of Culture and Execution Risks. So Tracer. Not only that, but it's also like in the military when you fire a bullet and the tracer goes behind it. So there's a play on words there. And then we have three other offers. So it's what we call an alignment intensive. And so this is primarily there's 80 to 120 hours worth of work that goes into it on our end. But what the client sees is they see us come on site for one day with a lot of pre-work and a lot of post-work because we always follow up with them to make sure that whatever the outcomes are that they had, they're able to sustain. So we don't just come in and say, okay, here you go, here's a pre-package and leave. We stay around because we want to make sure that it's a win. So that alignment intensive is one day, and then we do a 2 day and a 3 day. We offer those for varying scope and scale and size, and depending on what it is that the client really needs when we do those discovery calls. But I say all that because those are the primary things, right? 1 day, 2 day, or 3 day intensives, along with Tracer, which is scalable and it's definitely has a long-term scope if needed. And the way that we really position those offerings was when I said that we came into this marketplace initially, we didn't really know what the value proposition was going to be. We knew that we didn't want to be, and there is no way in the world that we would want to compete with a McKinsey, Bain, or BCG, right? Like we're a mom and pop shop, for lack of better words. And we don't really believe in the traditional consultancy and advisory model. We believe in flipping that on its head. And instead of us coming in as outside experts, we come in as experts in behavioral science. And so when we do an engagement, we come into the room knowing and understanding that whoever is in that room are the experts in their field. They're the experts at what they do. They've spent 15 or 20 years honing their craft, doing what they do best. We come in and we simply guide them through a series of exercises so they're able to present what the problems are, what the underlying problems are, what the unsaid issues are, right? Because whenever you're in a team or you're in an organization, there's always those unsaid things that everybody knows exist, but nobody wants to call it out or nobody wants to say it. When we do the engagements, we make them say it. We bring it out. We make that come to the surface and then we talk about it. And then it's no longer that unsaid thing. It's, hey, you remember how silly it was that we all thought that thing was a big thing and it was really nothing. And then we guide them through those series of exercises. So by the time our engagement is done, they own everything from the problems to the solutions. And then we do a follow up 30 days after to say, hey, sometimes we're in those learning bubbles, as we call it, and everybody's, yeah, we're going to do really well and everything's going to be great. And then you leave and it's like, we all go back to the same bad habits.
Yeah.
We're like the accountability partner that shows up 30 days later and says, okay, show me what you got. And it's, oh, we know those guys are going to be back in 30 days. So let's make sure we have something to show them. And that usually keeps up the momentum. And then we do a 60-day follow up. And it's, okay, they're coming back again. And just by human nature, again, with all of the research in behavioral science, it says that when you continue those same positive habits, typically at about 60 days, we're going to find in corporate culture that it starts to take hold. And then people start to get behind it. So you get those laggards who really didn't believe in it before. And then 60 days later, they see, hey, there's really some progress happening. And we're starting to see the true return on investment. And then 90 days afterwards, we do a final pulse check on them and say, okay, now 90 days after the engagement, how are things going? And
Yeah.
typically it is a world of difference from 90 days prior. It's, hey, we finally got Jim or Joe on board and they're knocking it out of the park. Or, hey, this person who we really thought was just like that old grumpy person, it comes to find out that he had really good ideas and those
Right.
ideas are propelling our business into the stratosphere. We just didn't really want to talk to him, or we just thought that he didn't really want to be part of the team, when usually that's not the case. Usually people really want to be value added. It's just
Mm.
sometimes we have our own biases that block that from happening.
Yeah, 100%. So really with that follow-up in place, there is that level of accountability when working with clients. And what is the duration as far as really like these series of exercises go, the assessments, how long is that?
So typically we do pre-work. So we'll do a discovery call with the executive team or whomever it is that initially contacts us. And that initial discovery call is to make sure that we're a good fit for them and they're a good fit for us. Truth be told, we don't work with everyone. This is really a labor of love that we have. And so we want to make sure that if somebody is going to pay us for what we do, that it's going to be money well spent for them. I know you probably hear it a lot like, oh, I'm not just in this for the money. But
Yeah.
in all honesty, this is what we love to do. And if we take on a client who doesn't align with what we do, or we just think that they're trying to check a box, then we'll say, no, I don't think we're the fit for you. Maybe I can refer you to another company who would be a better fit for you. So typically that happens about 40 days, 40 to 45 days prior to the initial engagement. We do the discovery call. We find out that, yes, we're going to love each other. This is going to be great. And then at about 30 days prior to the engagement, we'll do another follow-up call with them to really suss out what is the problem statement, what is actually going on, or at least what do you all think is actually going on? Because what we found is a lot of times during that pre-work, there will be things that come to the surface that the executive team might think are the real true problems, but they're really just the symptoms. And
Right.
so I can't tell you how many times we go into an engagement, and this is totally okay, just for anybody listening. We go into an engagement with an agenda that we pre-set out. And in the military, there's the saying that no plan survives first contact with the enemy, right? And so we know going into an engagement that we have an agenda and it looks nice and pretty, but during the course of that day's engagement or 2 or 3 days engagement, that agenda is going to change probably 2,000 times,
Yeah.
because we don't go into it with the notion that this is going to be a linear process. We make sure that in that pre-work, everybody knows. So to get back to your question, 45 days prior to the engagement, all the way to 90 days after the engagement is typically what that timeline looks like. We'll then follow up with the client in about 6 or 12 months just to check back and see and make sure that things are going well. But another thing that we really pride ourselves on is that we don't nickel and dime everyone. And we're seeking clients at the enterprise level, so $500 million companies and more. And what we've encountered time and time again is clients asking us, okay, so this is your set rate. How much is travel going to be? And we say, no, travel's included in that cost. Like we give you a set fee, or we have flat fees. That's all it is. Travel's included in that cost. All the pre-work, all the post-work's included in that cost. Any coaching from the psychologists that we have on staff, that's all included in that fee. So we don't say, hey, we're going to try and upsell you after the fact to say we need to come back out and do more. To me, that just seems disingenuous. And so that's really what we pride ourselves on, is making sure that, like, when we take on a client, it's not just a client, it's really a long-term partner that we're able to shoot text messages back and forth with. I can't tell you how many times an executive is, you mean I can send you a text message?
Yeah.
Yes, you can send me a text message. It's okay. I'm not going to bill you for that.
Yeah, yeah, having that personalization, really making that accessible. Oftentimes in the consulting world, we don't see that happening. Who is like your ideal client as far as who you prefer to work with? Because I know that was something that you mentioned, like really being ultra selective about the type of client that, comes through your process. What does that look like right now for Lunabre?
Yeah, when we first started this out, we weren't sure where it was going to come from. We ended up having a CEO of a company contact us and say, and he was a prior Marine Corps officer, and he gave us our first shot, and it was amazing. It was great. We still talk to him to this day. He actually ended up becoming one of our mentors, right? So we go out and we do a consulting gig for him, and then he becomes one of our mentors. Who would have thought? But it's been wonderful. And so as we've grown and as we've gone through the whole client acquisition process, we're in a bit of a shifting phase right now. You all actually had somebody on a few weeks ago named Carl Grant III, and I heard him on your all's podcast, and I immediately contacted him and said, "Hey, I think we need your services." So he's helping us to transition from mid-market companies to enterprise level companies. So
Okay.
we were targeting $45 million to $50 million annual recurring revenue, and now we're at $500 million and more,
Mhm.
primarily because we're looking at scope of impact. And like for us, we've seen the ROI to date to be astronomical,
Mhm.
right? And I'll get back to your pointed question here in just a moment, but I want to give a little more context
Mhm.
because our ROI to date, and it sounds ludicrous, and just to give a little more background, for those who may not know, in consulting and advising,
Mhm.
the return on investment average is 5 to 10x. And if you're hitting 7x ROI, you're seen as the golden child of consulting.
Right.
Our average ROI is 60x, and our minimum right now is 19x with our maximum, and it almost feels weird to say it, but it's 364x. And so maybe some people might say, "It just means you're not charging enough." To be honest with you, like that shows us that the traditional consulting model i- is not optimized. It
Mhm.
shows us that flipping that on its head and having ownership and accountability throughout the entire process is key. And that's what we've really honed in on. So the reason why we're shifting to more of the enterprise level, so C-suite or board members, is because we want to be able to impact more people at a bigger scale, at more longitudinally than we can on a smaller scale with mid-market companies. We still love our mid-market companies. Like we have a client right now who comes back time and time again, and we love working with them. And so it's not like we're going to stop working with them, but we've just seen the scope and scale of impact that we can make, and we want to make that on an even bigger scale.
Love that. Now, as far as that goes on the client acquisition front, like what are you guys doing right now as far as really getting after? Currently, it's the mid-market businesses that, you're primarily working with. What are some of those avenues, whether it's paid ads, social media, LinkedIn, word of mouth referrals? What's your way for generating leads?
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? Like I covered earlier, the product-based versus service-based business. And there was a point in time where I was posting to LinkedIn and I used Buffer, right, to schedule all my LinkedIn posts and stuff. And to me, it felt necessary because I wanted to make sure that people know that I exist, that we exist. But I also don't want it to get to the point that it just seems fake. And I think in a business like this, the worst thing that we could do is to try to automate things just to automate them without having the personable aspect to it. Like earlier, I gave the example of everything just scaling so fast technically, especially with AI.
Mhm.
And to me, there's a negative connotation to that because you forget the human. So to really answer your question, we are referral based. And I think that as much as that feels like it's slow, it's, I think, slow on purpose, and it's more methodical and it's more thought out and it's more targeted because the last thing I want is for a bunch of people to contact us and say, "Hey, we want to work with you." And then we find out that, okay, we're not the right fit. And if we do that through LinkedIn ads or through traditional marketing and advertising, I feel like that's a good way to just turn off the market for us because that word's going to spread, right? Hey, I contacted these guys and I guess we're just not good enough for us to work with them. When of course that's not the case. We just want to make sure that we're going to be able to provide the value that they need and want. And if we
Mhm.
can't do that, then we don't want to be disingenuous and accept that client. So to really answer your question, it's referral based and it's very personable. And so we also want to make sure that if we are working with a client that our values align and that they're doing it for the goodness of, yes, in business it's the bottom line, it's the profit margins, it's the monetary outcomes, but we also want to make sure that they're not doing it because they want to cut half their staff. We wouldn't want to work with somebody who says, "Hey, we want you guys to come in because we plan on cutting 50% of the workforce and we just want to figure out how to make things work even better with less people." To us, that would be a poor fit. We wouldn't want to pursue something like that.
And you probably know this as well, just through the podcast, we talk about that idea of predictability, right? Especially when it comes to referrals not being the most consistent way to actually generate leads. What are you looking at as like a founder to build more predictability on that lead gen side of things, especially as you guys are going now after the enterprise businesses? What's your thought process there, that next step?
Yeah, predictability is certainly something that has come to the forefront within the past 6 months or so. Predictability in terms of, hey, we're going to have this number of clients and we're going to be able to send these number of people out to the field to do all these engagements. We are still, in the grand scheme of things, we're still fairly early on in the growth phase. And so we do not have that predictability necessarily. But I feel like once that first enterprise level domino falls, the word is going to spread. And having the ROI that we have right now, being able to do that on an enterprise scale, I think is going to turn a lot of heads. And it's going to get to a point where we're going to want to turn down that faucet a little bit because it's going to be a bit much. Our price points are like 0.01% of the administrative costs of an enterprise level company. And so to bring us in and to do even the lowest level engagement that we have, if that provides 60x ROI, they're going to say, holy cow, where have we been without you guys? Because again, we're not the McKinsey Baines BCGs. We're not coming in and giving you pretty binders and presentations. We're having you do the work and own the work. And we're not going to be that off ramp to say, hey, these guys are the experts. They came in and told us what to do and it didn't work. So don't blame us. It's, hey, we brought these guys in or we have two women right now on staff who are brilliant psychologists. We brought these ladies in and they were phenomenal and they guided us through this. So it's like us showing them how to fish instead of coming in and fishing for them. And I feel like through that, that doesn't solve predictability, but I feel like once the word starts to spread, we're going to get to a point where we need to grow our staff exponentially because it's just such a different consulting and advising model than currently exists.
And when you say that, is it more from like a fulfillment standpoint? Obviously, when you enter that hyper growth phase, like you have to look at capacity, right? You can only serve a certain number of clients, but your offer has to be dialed in such a way to where it can sustain that. Is it more on that side or on the sales side of things? What's your navigation there?
Yeah, so I will be completely upfront with you. I've been a serial entrepreneur and I am terrible at sales. So again, product based, hey, I have a widget and it looks really pretty and when people want to buy that widget versus the service based business where it's us selling ourselves and our outcomes. So to really answer your question, it's primarily performance based. We are not only are we very intentional about the clients that we bring on, but we're very intentional about the people we bring on to staff. And so right now we have four people on staff. We're bringing on one more here within the next few weeks. She's a special operations psychologist. All of everybody that we know on staff, we know personally. And I'm the only person on staff who doesn't have a PhD. Right. And so maybe I'm the smartest person because the saying is to surround yourself with people smarter than you. And so it's really performance based because we know that there's only a certain capacity that each of us has to be able to go out and serve our clients. But we also know that we have a very rich and deep pool of very brilliant people that we can select from when we do need to continue to grow. And so I feel like as we continue to go through the growth phase and we see what the new normal looks like, we'll be able to scale up the folks who work for us to be able to go out and do those things because what we're doing is like we're blending a few different things to really make something that's a bit more proprietary, but it's really something that the people on our staff have done for decades in the military. It's just changing some of the nuances of it and then employing it in a very special way to the corporate sector. So it's not like they're going to come on staff and start from zero. They're starting from maybe 80 out of 100, and we can get them to 20% of the way to get there once they get on staff.
So from what it sounds like, really on that sales side of things, kind of expansion, growth there, is that kind of like the next step as you're looking at really even like growing more in the enterprise market? Are you looking at even growing your sales team there, really taking yourself out of that role so you can focus more on like the founder level work? What's your thought process around that?
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why we brought on Carl. Hearing Carl's story on your podcast and then doing a little more research around who he was and what he's done in his life and his values really align with ours as well. Bringing him in and helping us with the go-to-market strategy for enterprise level. And then, of course, with the connections and the relationships that he has to make sure that, again, we're not using a shotgun approach. We're using a very tailored sniper approach to make sure that we target the right people for the right reasons at the right time. And so to answer your question, it depends, right? Like I want it to get to a point where our clients are evangelists for us and they're essentially selling our services for us because we do such a good job for them that they want all of their friends to experience the same thing. The way that we see it is in the consulting world, there's plenty of money to go around. There's plenty of people to go around. There are plenty of theories to go around. We just want to make sure that our clients are getting the value that they need and that they're not just spending frivolously to check a box, because it doesn't have to be that way. And I feel like being able to get back to more of the founder level stuff for me and not have to continue to work on the go-to-market strategy and all of the nuances with that is going to be very beneficial, because we have to revamp our website right now because we're shifting from mid-market to enterprise level. So we need a different persona, if you will. So all those little things that go on with being a business owner or a co-founder is important. And I feel with all the other founders out there, like you have to be everything to everybody at all the right times. But when you're in the growth phase, it's nice that you get to push away some of those things that you know you're just not as good at.
And that being maybe sales, since you've mentioned.
Yes.
Um, that's so interesting. That is like really that plan, really on the expansion side, really having that go-to-market strategy place on that acquisition front, and then maybe bringing some setters, some closers to help with that influx, especially as you guys do look at rebranding, revamping, and entering enterprise market. What does your vision look like over the next 6 to 12 months as far as like growth and scaling? Paint that picture for us. Do you have like performance milestones, revenue targets that you're really looking to hit with Lunabre?
Yeah, last year we had, let's see. So last year was really our first year in I guess the year prior to that was our first real year in operation, but last year was our first year with having a continuity of clients. And so last year we had 3 clients. This year we want to double to 6. Next year we want to double that to 12. But we're also increasing the price points because of not just going from mid-market to enterprise level, but also because of the polish that we've been able to put on everything, because every time we do an engagement, we get even better,
Yeah.
because we've done this again tons of times for the military and for the government. Doing it for the civilian sector is a little bit different, but we learn every single time we do this. And so to answer your question, we're looking at 6 clients this year, 12 clients next year, and then continuing to double that every year, which sounds ambitious, but I feel like we're going to far exceed those goals as we continue to grow. If we're as good as we say I am, then I feel like those are pretty low level goals for us to achieve.
Absolutely. What do you feel like as a founder is right now like that constraint you're looking to really navigate through as you're looking at scaling and growth, especially now as you're bringing a lot of those pieces in? What does that look like for you? What's your thought process around that?
Is it primarily around the navigating the issues, or I'm sorry if you could
Yeah, just more
dive a
on,
little bit deeper?
yeah, as far as on your fulfillment and really getting the messaging out there, what do you feel like that is right now?
Yeah, so it's a little challenging just because when we think about the way that we are communicating with humans and communicating with people who have this preconceived notion about what consulting and advising is, they have the MBB model in their head. So they have the model of, I need an industry expert to come in and help us navigate this. Where we come in and we say, we're intentionally not an industry expert in what you do. We're intentionally experts at behavioral science to help you all figure out how to navigate this so you all have ownership from beginning to end, which that's not the traditional model. So what I found to be the most challenging is finding the right framework and verbiage and communication model to convey in a concise amount of time, because executives in enterprise level companies, they have a very minute amount of spare time to be able to understand a new process or somebody new to the marketplace.
Yeah.
So it's been pretty challenging to figure that out, but that's also where Carl comes in because he has that expertise. And instead of me and my co-founder, Dr. Noah, trying to figure out how to navigate that piece, we can use like the cheat code and say, hey, Carl, help us out with this and help us figure this out so that we're not sitting here spinning our wheels, because we want to continue to make the impacts that we know we can make without having to fail so many times before we finally get that win.
Yeah, 100%. Especially because there's always like this lack of problem awareness at the C-suite level with, hey, is this going to be a priority right now or does this fit? We're really looking at getting a lot of that education out there, even like source content, really producing more and more of that. So to where there is a lot of that value up front. And that sounds to be the direction that you're going in, at least with Lunabre. So that sounds great. Now, if we brought a genie in the room, you snap your finger and all of a sudden you have all these unlimited resources. It's a fun question. What would you implement immediately to accelerate really the growth of Lunabre today?
It is so interesting you asked that question because I ask a very similar question whenever I'm talking to clients. I ask them about the magic wand, if you had a magic wand. So, yeah, awesome question, but not one that I was prepared for. So, let me take a moment to think. If I had a magic wand, I would say, I would say what I would want is for a high level enterprise, for an enterprise level CEO or chief operating officer to give us a shot at the enterprise level. Because and the reason I say that is because, like I said before, I feel like it's only going to take one domino because our results to date have spoken for themselves. And once we get to that enterprise level and they see the difference that it can make, it's going to make a difference not only in the business, but it's going to make a difference in the lives of everybody that's involved in that entire tail, not only at the C-suite level, but across the board. It's going to affect the way that they interact with each other, the way that they interact with their subordinates or their direct reports, the way that they interact with people at home. Like, we're not a culture consultancy company, but that's a byproduct of what we do. We help with targeting operational outcomes, but the massive byproduct of that is people are required to achieve that. They're required to work together. They're required to know and understand some of the nuances of their coworkers. And whether that's a coworker that they work with on a daily basis or somebody that they work with tangentially, I say it, how do you change a culture at an organization? It's one experience at a time. And so being able to come in and provide that jump start of experience with the people who are in that room, it has a cascading effect. And so if I had that magic wand, I would say a CEO or a COO at an enterprise level company, let us come in, show you the magic, and we're off to the races.
Yeah, 100%. Really kind of breaking through that. How do you see the technology consulting industry evolving year over year? Because a lot of your focus is on human performance optimization. How is Lunabre positioning itself for that type of future?
It's interesting you bring that up because we've thought about that quite a bit, and we are definitely people experts. We thought about the technical side of things, and I feel like the technical aspect, the technical consulting side is awash with people who are more adept and better at doing that than we are. And so if we really want to make the profound impacts that we know we can make, we have to focus our offer. And our offer is on the human aspect. That technical aspect, there are so many people who can do it so well, and so many agencies out there who can contribute towards that end, that I think we would be doing a disservice to clients to try and split our focus. So to answer your question, we would leave that to the experts who are as good at that as we are at the people side.
Love that. Really bringing that human element in. And the best way for the listeners to get in touch with you and work with you at Lunabre, what would that look like?
Yeah, if you come to lunabre.com, so it's lunabre.com, or find me on LinkedIn. I'm Jeremiah Patterson. I'm happy to connect with anybody anytime, have a cup of coffee, whatever it is. I know that this was a podcast about Lunabre, but I also love talking to people. And so if anybody needs advice or just help navigating what it means to be an entrepreneur, I know it can feel pretty lonely out there. So please feel free to reach out.
On that note, what would be then the best piece of advice you can give to the listeners today, especially some of those entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs that are thinking about starting a consulting company, but they're hesitant maybe? What would you offer on one last note?
I would tell them I would tell them to just try. I think that so many, when I started my first business at 14, I just tried.
Mhm.
And the way that I tried was I just shot an email to a small business owner and said, "Hey, this is a website that I redid for you because yours doesn't look that great." Granted, I was 14, so I didn't really know how to word it correctly, but I got the point across that I can do this for you if you're willing to pay my very low sum of $1,000 for a website. Because to a 14-year-old, that's like winning the lottery. But what I found is that people are just afraid to ask, they're afraid to try. And so just try. Read Eric Ries's book, The Startup Way. Build, measure, learn. Fail fast. Like, don't fail magnificently. Fail small and fail fast. And you'll learn so much, but just try.
Yeah, 100%. We have to go through the failures to come out strong and learn from those lessons. Thanks for joining us today, Jeremiah. It was a pleasure having you on Founders Future, sharing your journey onwards and upwards to continued success. We're looking forward to following the journey along going into this year. To our listeners, if you enjoyed today's episode, of course, don't forget to subscribe to Founders Future wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. You can also follow us over here at closers.io for more resources and insights. We're dedicated to helping businesses accelerate their growth through trained appointment setters and world-class sales systems. Until then, everyone, keep climbing, and we'll see you all on the next one.